All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. Before we get started, just a couple quick housekeeping rules here. We are going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to view the session again later or share it with a colleague, we will have that recording available on our EDWS YouTube page. My name is Ryan Smith. I am the Wellness Program Administrator with Georgia State University EDWS, Employee Development and Wellness Services, and by trade, I am a registered dietitian. During today's session, if you've got any questions, comments, ideas, anything like that, we'd love to hear it. And you can put it in the chat box in WebEx, and we'll be sure to address those questions at the end of today's presentation. My colleague Tony is online with us, so if you're having any audio or visual issues, please go ahead and select all panelists whenever you're entering something in the chat, and you can send a message to her and she'll be able to help resolve any problems that you might have. With that being said, we will go ahead and get started. So today's recipe is a little different than what we usually have on here. Typically, we are focused on meals, but this week I wanted to do more of a dessert. It's something that I know people ask me about very frequently when I'm working in my role as a dietitian. They want to know, what do I do when I get a sweet craving? And an easy answer is to tell people like, oh, you can have fruit. But for everyone, that may not be enough to really address that sweet tooth. There's more to some of our favorite desserts and treats than just the sugar content. And today's recipe aims to basically make a healthier version of ice cream, or as this recipe calls it, nice cream. It is entirely fruit-based. There's no dairy involved, so this is a vegan recipe. In the summer, when it's as hot as it's been outside lately, something like this, it's ice cold, it can be incredibly refreshing. It's a great time to buy strawberries. There are a lot of great deals on them. So we are going to be working with strawberries today. The cool thing about this recipe, though, is that it's very flexible and you can essentially mix and match any fruit for your main flavor. And then you use bananas as your base, which gives it a thicker consistency. In terms of equipment, we are going to need a food processor for this, and you'll need access to a freezer where you can store this when you're preparing it. And then, of course, after you've made the nice cream, you'll want to store it in the freezer as well. Otherwise, it's pretty simple. We'll have a cutting board, some lemon juice, and the bananas, and that's pretty much it. So this will be a very, very easy to make recipe. You do have to plan a little bit ahead of time in order to make it, since you are going to be freezing some things, but we'll talk about some time-saving steps you can do to expedite that process as well. So to get started, you're going to want 1 pound or 16 ounces of fresh strawberries. So fresh strawberries are, like I mentioned, in season right now. They're pretty easy to come by. What we're going to do is I've gone ahead and rinsed them off just to get anything that may be on the surface. Whenever you buy a pound of strawberries, I encourage you to look through it, search for any ones that might be molding a little bit or might be a little damaged or bruised. You'll probably want to pull those out. They may be a little mushy. So we're just going to take the kind of best strawberries that we have in the pound that we buy. And what we're going to do is we're just going to cut the tops off. Now, there are a couple different ways to do this. Some people will use a small paring knife. And what they'll do is they'll make a circular cut around the top. And essentially what you're doing is you are pulling out the top stem as well as the little kind of core there at the top. And you have these whole strawberries where they've got the little pit removed from the top. That is absolutely an option. You can do that. If you're pressed for time or you're just not feeling like doing that for every strawberry, you can also just take a knife and cut just a clean, straight top off like that. The top of the strawberry here is a little firmer, and some people aren't as crazy about it, but with the food processor we're going to be using, it really doesn't matter too much if that's still intact. Whenever you are cutting them, try to cut as close to that stem as you possibly can, because we want to have as much strawberry left over as we can get. We want the best yield from it. So I'm going to continue cutting this, and we're going to talk a little bit about the health properties of strawberries, because they are a great fruit. Much like any fruit or vegetable, there are a lot of nutritional benefits that they bring to the table to really just enhance our well-being. Most Americans do not get enough fruits or vegetables in their diet, so something like this can be a nice way to supplement it. It's great for adults. It's also great for kids too, of course, because who doesn't love having like a dessert treat like this? So really, really good summer option. In terms of nutrition, strawberries have a high water content, which, as it's been hot outside, if you're like me, you've probably been sweating a little more lately, coming to and from different buildings when you're outside of the sanctuary of air conditioning. So staying hydrated is really important, but we can actually help meet our hydration needs through food as well. It does not have to just be from drinking water. So when you think of a fruit or vegetable, there is a lot of water content in them, meaning that they can help us feel full because we're eating a volume of food that feels like a lot, but a lot of it's water, so there's no calories in it, and the water we get from it does help us stay hydrated. So it's a great option to help meet your fluid needs. The other major nutritional benefit is, of course, going to be the fiber content of these. When you look at the outside of a strawberry, it's unique in that it's got those little seeds all around the outside of it. And those seeds contribute fiber to your diet, as well as other parts of the strawberry flesh itself. So fiber is beneficial in a number of ways. It can help us with weight maintenance by allowing us to feel full and satisfied on less food. It actually can slow down some parts of digestion in your stomach, which makes it feel like the food lasts longer, so you're not hungry as quickly again, which is excellent. And then on the other end of the digestion system, it promotes healthy movement through your gut. So whenever you are trying to have healthy bowel movements, which is important, we may not all talk about it that much, but it is an important aspect. You definitely want to have enough fiber in your diet to stay regular, and strawberries are an excellent way to get that. And then the other big nutrient component is going to be vitamin C. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. So we've cut the tops off of all the strawberries, nothing too fancy. And we are going to use the food processor, but we're just going to coarsely chop these. So when I say coarsely chop, I mean that we're just going to run the knife through them. Doesn't have to be super exact. You can start by cutting each strawberry in half if you'd like and try to make it more precise. Or if you want to group them together and carefully rock the knife through them like so, just moving from left to right, you can start to get them into smaller pieces. Of course, be very cognizant and aware of where your hands and fingers are. We do not want to have any accidents as we're cutting this. And we're just, again, going to coarsely chop these. So I mentioned vitamin C being a very great nutrient. Most of us associate it with immune function. So it does help us keep a healthy immune system. And strawberries are a phenomenal source of them. So you can get most of your daily needs in vitamin C from just a single serving of strawberries. And then with the other ingredients we have in this recipe, you'll see when I show you the nutrition label towards the end that you're going to get almost 100% of your vitamin C in one serving of the strawberry and ice cream that we're making. So I've coarsely chopped these up. This is fine. Again, these don't have to be super uniform. You just don't want the chunks to be too big. Your food processor should be able to handle it. If you don't have a food processor and you're working with something like a blender, for example, where the blades are lower in the base, so the food processor is nice because the blades are very wide. They come fairly high up in the unit. If you're using a blender and it's just got the four at the bottom, you'll have to be aware of that. Bigger pieces may have trouble getting chopped. In that case, take a little more time with this step and try to chop the strawberries into smaller, finer pieces. It'll help with your equipment if it's not quite as powerful. So I'm just going to scoot the strawberries over to this part of the cutting board. And the other major ingredient we're going to be using today is bananas. Now, bananas are kind of a funny fruit. I know not everyone is crazy about them. It kind of seems to be a love it or hate it sort of affair. The good news is with this recipe, while we are using bananas because they're important for the structure of the ice cream and keeping it thick, you don't really taste the flavor that much when everything's said and done. The strawberries, I think, really overpower it in a good way and provide the majority of the flavor. So even if you're not crazy about bananas, I encourage you to give this a try. It might still work out. You might still really enjoy it and find a way to have some bananas in your diet while still enjoying the flavor of other fruits. So you're going to need 2 medium-sized ripe bananas. The ripeness is, of course, important. So you may want to think ahead when you're planning to make this and try to get bananas that are either going to go ripe whenever it's time for you to chop them up, or if you're lucky, you might be able to snag some at the grocery store that are ready to go. So I am just removing the peel here, and we're going to repeat the same idea that we did with the strawberries for the banana. We're going to just coarsely chop it. What I like to do is I will cut the banana into smaller segments like this, cut those segments in half, and that gives me a flat area that I can put on the cutting board to work with. Otherwise, the bananas tend to roll around a little bit, and that can be unsafe when we're cutting things. So once I've got them into those flat pieces, I just run the knife through in the opposite direction and get some nice little half banana slices here, which is just what we need for the food processor. Now, bananas are a little more dense than strawberries in terms of calories. They are a higher calorie fruit, but that density is what helps the texture of this dessert end up working. So that's one banana. We'll go ahead and repeat for the second one. In terms of nutrition, just like strawberries, bananas do have some water content. They do provide us with fiber, which I talked about the benefits of earlier. And the other benefit that bananas have is they are an excellent source of potassium. Potassium is another nutrient that most Americans don't even come close to getting enough of, unfortunately. We can get it from a variety of sources. Things like yogurt can have potassium in it, baked potatoes have potassium, but I think bananas are probably the most famous source of potassium. So throwing a couple of these into your diet can be great for meeting those potassium recommendations. And if we get to do it in the form of a frozen dessert, that's even more fun. So we have chopped up the fruit here. We've got the strawberries, we've got the bananas. Again, it's 2 medium bananas and 1 pound of fresh strawberries. And what you'll do now is using a baking sheet or a similar flat surface, we're going to want to lay them out and spread them into a single thin layer. We're going to put them in the freezer after that. And the reason we want them in a thin layer is if they're stacked on top of each other, they might freeze in sort of a clump. If you've ever bought frozen fruit and maybe it's thawed a little bit and then refrozen, you know, you get that big like ice ball of fruit. We don't want that because it'll be hard on our food processor. So try to spread it out into an even layer. And what you'll do is you will put that in the freezer for just an overnight amount of time. About 12 hours is a good bit of time to do. So if you're planning to make this for a particular day, just chopping these up and throwing them in the freezer the night before is the best way to handle it. So I'm actually going to set this to the side for now. I have gone ahead and pre-frozen some fruit. Let me grab that real quick. So once you've frozen the fruit and you've got it spread out on a tray like so, we are going to add it into the food processor, and we're going to start by just doing the strawberries. We want to coarsely pulse those a little bit and chop them up into a finer sort of mixture. It's almost like we're making a smoothie here. And when you pull these out, depending on the temperature of your freezer and the strength of your food processor, you may want to give them 5 to 10 minutes to thaw a little bit out in the open. If you're not confident about the strength of your blender, the Ninja food processor that I have is great. I definitely recommend it if you're in the market for one. And I'm not too worried about it, so I only thawed them for about 5 minutes just before the demonstration started. So we've got the strawberries in there, and what we're going to do is we're just going to pulse. So that's just the setting on your food processor or blender where it just spins it for a second. We're going to do about 10 quick pulses just to chop it up a little bit. I apologize, this may be a little loud. Okay. And what we've done, and I can show you here, is we've gotten them chopped a little more. This is why we didn't have to do too much work with the knife. So they're nice and cold. We've got them chopped up. And now we're going to get ready to add in the bananas. We just chopped the strawberries first to get them into smaller pieces. I do recommend having a spatula nearby to sort of scrape down the edges if things start to stick near the side of your blender or food processor. Okay, and now we will go ahead and add in the bananas. Now, I mentioned that you do chop these up and then put them in the freezer overnight. And if you want to save time, you absolutely can buy pre-frozen fruit. You can buy frozen strawberries, you can buy frozen banana pieces, or any other fruit that you might want to mix into here. I do like using fresh fruit just because when it's in season, it's very affordable to get that fresh fruit. And I think there's something to the taste of it that I really enjoy personally. So that's why we're working with fresh ones today. But if you want to buy pre-chopped frozen strawberries, that will absolutely work. Emphasis on the pre-chopped part. You need them to be in small pieces because once they're frozen, it's not going to be safe to chop them up. They're going to be too hard and your knife may rock and move in a bad way. So with the bananas in there, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of lemon juice now as well. All right. And then the last thing that we have standing by is I've got a 1/4 cup of just ice cold water. And you definitely want it to be cold. And the water is there if as you're blending things or food processing them, you find that the processor's having trouble, maybe the fruit's a little too frozen, it's too solid, you can add a little bit of water to it at a time, just about a tablespoon at a time, to try to adjust the consistency and make it a little more liquidy. That may help you get through it if you're having trouble. On the other end, you can always put it back in the freezer to get it a little more frozen once you've blended it all up. So we just keep that standing by in case we need it. So bear with me here. I'm going to blend this for about 30 seconds or so, and then we'll check on how it's doing. Okay. And you can check on the consistency of it and take a look at it. So mine's actually looking pretty good right now. You can see it's nice and thick. It's not really running. So a smoothie, if you were to make a smoothie as opposed to the nice cream that we're making, because you might notice, well, these ingredients seem really similar. A smoothie typically has more liquid in it. You would have perhaps milk or a juice, and that gives it its drinkable form. But we want this to be pretty thick because we want it to be like the consistency of ice cream. So far, this is looking good. I'm not thinking that I'm actually going to add any water to it because I like the texture it's at. I am going to use my spatula here. Just move down. I see I've got a couple pieces of strawberries on the side, and we can push them in. And I'm using like a rubber grill spatula right now. If you just use like a regular rubber spatula, it would be smarter. I just had this out for getting some fruit off of this tray. Just to use it again. So we're going to pulse it for a little bit longer, just make sure everything is well blended, and then we should be ready to serve. And depending on the strength of your blender, that may take a little longer than it did on my end. It really just depends on your equipment. So I'm going to pull this guy out. And again, you can see the thickness of it. If this were a smoothie, it would be running off the blades. That is not the case here. This is nice and thick, just like we want it, ice cold. That's the exact texture we are looking for here. I'm going to just try to scrape some of this off, and then I'll just set this over here and clean that up later. So let's get a bowl here and get my ice cream scoop. Now at this point, transferring it to a container that you can put in the freezer, just with a lid on it, almost like you would a carton of ice cream. You'd want to move that over and store it in the freezer. If you had to add more water to it because your food processor or blender wasn't able to handle it, you may want to pop it back in the freezer for 15 to 30 minutes just to let it solidify a little more again if you had to liquefy it a lot. But that is not going to be an issue here. This is nice and thick. You can see it sticking in the scoop there. So we're going to get a serving here. And this makes 4 servings. A serving size is going to be 1 cup. And we're going to talk about the nutrition because, you know, this is certainly a little more work than reaching for a carton of ice cream out of the freezer. And we're going to talk about the benefit of this in terms of nutrition, what it brings to the table, what it doesn't bring to the table when we compare it to ice cream. I do recommend, I'm actually going to grab some of these. If you want to make it look a little fancier, you can definitely add some fresh strawberries to the top of it, kind of making it into more of a smoothie bowl. And there it is. That is our strawberry ice cream. It's super, super tasty, really creamy. I really like the flavor of it. And the texture is just, it's so good. With how hot it's been lately, having something ice cold like this it's just the best thing. But ice cream is certainly a little more dense. So if you're trying to watch your total caloric intake, you're trying to get in more fruits, this is a good way to do it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pause my video here for a second. And I'm actually going to share with you the nutrition information. I want you to be able to take a look at it and just see what we're talking about whenever we compare these two. Give me just a moment. Okay, hopefully you're able to see that now. So on the left-hand side, we've got the nutrition for the recipe we made today, the strawberry and ice cream. And on the right-hand side, we've got the nutrition for just typical ice cream. I got some averages of some different store brands, and this is what the numbers came out looking like. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that a lot of ice cream, when you buy it, the serving size will actually only be maybe half a cup or 2/3 of a cup. So it can be a little tricky because they try to make it look like, okay, yeah, if you eat a very small amount, it's a little lower in calories. what I've done here is I've modified it to make these servings equal to one another to make the comparison a little easier. So in 1 cup of strawberry ice cream, there's only 90 calories compared to the typical ice cream where there's 270 calories. So typical ice cream will have 3 times as many calories as what we made today. That is a really big difference. As we look at the other nutrition, of course, the strawberry and ice cream is incredibly low fat because it's based on just fruit. The carbohydrate count is lower. There's much less sugar, total sugar, and there's no added sugar. All the sugars in today's recipe are natural compared to the 20 grams of added sugar in your typical ice cream. Typical ice cream will have no fiber, and the ice cream or the nice cream that we made today has 4 grams of fiber, which is about 14% of your daily goal, which is excellent. If we look at vitamin C down here at the bottom, we can see that what we made today has 80% of your daily vitamin C in a 1 cup serving. So if you're looking for a healthy immune system, this is a great refreshing way to get in some of that vitamin C, get in some fiber, and you really save on the calories as well. So let me pull my video back up here. So the nutrition information that we just gave, we are going to send out with a copy of the recipe so that everyone will be able to make this at home as well if you're interested. Like I mentioned, you can substitute a lot here. If you don't like strawberries or you want to try another flavor, try pineapple, try mango, follow the same steps where we are going to chop the fruit if it needs to be chopped, freeze it, and then we're going to combine it with the banana. The banana is critical though because it provides the creamy texture that makes this work together. Otherwise, you'll probably end up with a more liquidy product. You can definitely try it, but it'll be closer to a smoothie and less like ice cream. I'm going to take a moment here and look at the chat to see if we have any questions. Right. I don't see any questions at the moment. Again, if you have any, please feel free to put them in the chat. So we're going to send out, like I said, the copy of the recipe and the nutrition information. I really want to encourage everyone to try this. If you actually look up nice cream, it's a thing on the internet that people do. So there are recipes for all sorts of different fruit and flavor combinations. So if this one doesn't seem like it's your cup of tea, I encourage you to look into those other flavors, experiment with it. I also like to do different toppings. I've done sliced almonds, walnuts, chia seeds. You could even do some dark chocolate shavings on top if you wanted to make it a little richer. And you'd still be coming in at a lower calorie count than typical ice cream. So very healthy treat, great for kids as well as adults. Okay, hello. How long does it last in the freezer is the question. Great question. Definitely, you're going to want it in an airtight container. When it's in the freezer, things like this in the freezer can last a very long time. We're talking several months. The biggest thing is whenever you freeze it, it might freeze into a kind of more of a solid block depending on how cold your freezer is. So if you're a little worried about that, what you can do is move it into smaller serving sizes, like do small containers in the freezer, and then it's more of a grab and go kind of thing. You can pull one out, like maybe have it in a small dish like this, pull it out, and then give it a minute or two to thaw before you dig in. If you were to freeze the entire thing, like a picture of it like this, it might end up just being like a really, really thick block. And that's something you probably wouldn't want to do unless you were planning to serve it all at once. So you'll have it for months in the freezer, but I do recommend portioning it into smaller containers just to make it easier to serve. It's almost like what you do with chili, where you'd probably want to try to put it into small batches rather than one really big container of it. And I don't see any other questions at this time. So keep an eye out on your email. We'll be sending the recipe along with a link to a quick survey. You can let us know what you thought of today's session, if you've got ideas for improvement or future sessions. We also do a variety of activities with our office. Tomorrow, we'll be doing a guided meditation session from 12 p.m. to 12:30. So if you're interested, I encourage you to check that out. We do these demonstrations twice a month. Like I said, typically we're more meal focused. So we'll do like a breakfast, lunch, or dinner recipe. But today I wanted to do something a little different with a refreshing treat for the summer. If you're not already on our mailing list, we do send out emails for all of our events. You can email us at edws@gsu.edu, and we'll get you on that list. And we'll add that in the chat here in just a moment so you can have reference to the email. With that being said, thank you again, everyone, so much for attending. I appreciate your time, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.